Welcome, everyone. My name is Sandra Reimer, and I work with TourMagination on their communication. I'd like to welcome you this evening to our webinar about the Marvelous Music and Culture in Germany tour with René Regier and Rod Zook. As we get started, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Rod and René. Rod Zook has spent his adult life in places as diverse as rural Quebec, Central California, and urban Europe. Each location has impacted his life and worldview. Formerly a Mennonite Brethren pastor, Rod later transitioned to become a German and English language coach, mainly for business clients. Following more than 25 years in Munich, Germany, Rod lives in California and coaches clients from Munich as well as individuals from other parts of Germany, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, Texas, California, and points in between. Rod and his wife Julia have 2 grown children. Rod's brother-in-law, René Regier. René began his musical career as principal violist of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. From there, he became an educator, training and influencing countless professional musicians, most notably as the Dean of the Glenn Gould School of the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, followed by more than a decade as viola instructor and orchestra conductor at the University of Ottawa in Canada. Along with his wife, pianist Jenny Regier, he has performed, conducted, and taught extensively in North America, Europe, and China. He has always been deeply involved in church life in each of the cities where he has lived, in all aspects of music and worship, preaching, plus as a deacon and teacher. He and Jenny have 2 grown sons and 5 grandchildren. Now I am going to turn the webinar over to Rod and René. And you'll notice they are wearing very similar dress shirts. They tell me that this was completely an accident. It just shows how much they're on the same wavelength. Rod and René, go ahead and show your webcams.
Okay. Hello. It really was not planned, René. We don't do that kind of thing with the shirts, right?
I was going to go change, but we didn't have enough time. So.
Oh, okay.
Our audience is stuck with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. And a big welcome to the rest of you. We look forward to taking you on a quick run through the tour we have planned for you in September. We'll give you some glimpses of places we've been. In fact, except for Bingen am Rhein, one of us has been to each of these places. So we look forward to going back and taking you along with us. I'll be going back to a place that is arguably my second home. I spent at least 25, 26 years in Germany, so southern Germany feels like home to me, but this time we'll be traveling in the north. To me, there's just something about Germany that works, and I look forward to exploring that with you, a group of more objective people. The Germans aren't very objective about their country. But we'll also, I think, gain from some interaction with Germans as well, who can join us along the way. And we'll work through whether it works or not, in spite of what Germans say about their country, because they're perfectionists. They expect perfection in themselves and in their country as well.
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm
getting ahead of myself. Sorry, Rod.
Well, I got ahead of you too, so there we go. I'll be sharing from my extensive travel and interaction with Germans and other internationals in Munich and other parts of Germany as a resident, not as a tourist, not as a professional tour guide, but as a resident and at times a wannabe Münchner. I've also been there as a pastor, as a friend and mentor and a coach, a trainer for business English and business communication. I've been in their churches, their hospitals, their homes and pubs and companies and elsewhere. I know how to get around the country and find spots that are off the beaten track. Or I know people who do, and some of them I think will join us at various stages along the tour. I've used train and bus and subway and bicycle for commuting in Munich, and I've traveled by train from Rome to Stockholm and Vienna to Paris. Yes, those are the high points every tourist wants to hit, but if you stay in the tourist mode, you miss understanding what the sights and sounds and smells mean. I've been with my German friends at their weddings. The top right-hand corner, the two top photos are my good friend Volker. I was best man at his wedding. I've officiated, in fact, at 4 of the 4 German church weddings. I've held their 5-week-olds. I've stood for 6 hours in the middle of 30,000 people, pressed together at the open-air venue for the first match of the 2006 World Cup soccer match in Germany. And it was quite an experience, and I can tell you how that World Cup event changed the country, not only for a week or a month, but I think for long term. It was a marvelous experience, and it changed the country.
My turn, and I'm still Rennie. And why am I doing this? I haven't lived in Europe, but it certainly has had an enormous impact on me. When I arrive, it always feels like I've come home, even though I don't live there. I love the tight compactness, the smell of old. It has a nucleus that connects with me. And having spent my whole life immersed in music, being in Europe, particularly Germany, from whence so much of it comes, is especially meaningful for me. I love the art form, and I love to share with others what I'm passionate about. I've always seen myself as a connector, connecting people, connecting people with the music itself. And I thought these goofy pictures of my grandkids kind of make that point in an offbeat way.
Yeah, I'll be able to tell you what the most important thing is for Germans, and maybe you can reflect and decide what the most important thing is for Canadians or Americans. Think about that a little bit and let us know in the chat box down on the left-hand bottom left of the screen. It should be there on your device as well, or laptop. It's a very informal poll. Sandra can collect the results. But I'll let you know then what Rolf, my German friend, and Rosa, his French wife, said were the most important things for Germans and for the French. I'll even tell you what Bill Field from Vancouver told me, or told all 3 of us in that informal beer garden setting, what he thinks the most important thing is for Canadians. But it's important, and I can tell you what the most important thing is for Americans. We'll check with each other at the end of the webinar, and we'll have discussions on those kinds of issues and questions as we tour together in September as well. So think about it as we go through the rest of the slides, and drop a note in the bottom in the chat box what you think the most important thing is for your country. Keep it simple, but we'll have a bit of time at the end of the session for that as well. This is simply a brief map of the locations we'll travel on. The The distances are there. We'll be focusing on Bingen, Leipzig, Berlin, Lübeck, and Hamburg. I've just put approximate durations of the train trips in there. That's good enough for North Americans, I think. It wouldn't be close to being good enough for Germans. They would like to know down to the minute how long the trip is going to take. But the trip from Bingen to Leipzig will take about 4.5 hours. That's the longest one we have, and so on. So,
Rod, was that a hint towards one of the correct answers is going to be to one of your questions? What the Germans would say about approximate travel times?
That would be one of the clues. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
so often you hear them talking in conversations, in small talk at parties or in the subway or even in business settings, how long this trip or that trip took and how long it should have taken. Yeah. So that might be a clue to what the most important thing is for Germans. Yeah.
I guess with all their efficiency, they have all this extra time to be able to talk about how much time they've spent doing everything.
Well, and then how much time they waste when it doesn't work like it's supposed to.
Anyway, back into a time when time meant something completely different. Hildegard's von Bingen. And what does a 12th century Benedictine nun have to do with a music tour? As you can see on that list in front of you, she was a lot of things, a true Renaissance person, or a polymath, as people like that are also known. She has a bit of a cult status nowadays, and probably something that would fill her with chagrin and shame. She was a very prolific composer. There are literally dozens of recordings of her many chants, hymns, and canticles. And we also thought that a day in Bingen would be a wonderful way to start the tour. With a visit to the Abbey where she lived, we would have a chance to get settled, get our bearings, get a chance to know each other a little bit, and maybe chill out for a day or so. So the next slide, we've got a few images from the Abbey itself. Founded and built in 1165, Eibingen was the second community under Hildegard's leadership. As you can see, it's solitary, serene, and it exudes a kind of a calm strength. Eibingen Abbey is also a World Heritage Site. It remains an active and functioning place, a vibrant community of women dedicating their lives to prayer and actively engaging in life through the creation of crafts and the making of wine. We will be participating in their daily prayer service, and they have invited us to have lunch with them after that. Bingen is wine country. We associate Germany with beer, as you've heard Rod so eloquently highlight already.
You haven't heard all of it yet on the beer.
It doesn't take long. It's pretty close to the top of the presentation. And rightly so, German is beer. But alongside that, Germany is also 8th on the list of world wine producers. And the Rhine Valley, Germany's largest wine region, is one of the world's foremost Riesling producers. So we look forward to actually tasting some there.
Okay, so after Bingen, we get rolling. This will, as I said, not be the first train trip I've been on. We even took the train from San Francisco to Chicago with our 2 kids back in the day. There's a shot of that in the top right-hand corner. Good memories of that for us as a family. And we've traveled extensively on all kinds of trains in Germany, regional puddle jumpers, suburban commuter trains like the yellow ones in the center. Those are the suburban trains from Berlin. Also on high-speed ICE trains. We've been from Rome to Stockholm, from Paris to Vienna. Not on the same trip, of course, but our train excursions on the trip will be mostly in very comfortable, clean trains largely the ICE, like Julia is standing next to in the bottom left-hand corner. And we'll be traveling with reservations, not our seats will be reserved. We might have some reservations as well, come to think of it. But we'll be traveling with seated reservations, so that means we'll have to catch that exact train on that platform at that time. But we'll learn how to do it, and you'll get used to it quite quickly.
So our next stop is going to be Leipzig and Thomaskirche, which is where Bach lived and worked the last 27 years of his life. If Leipzig, the home of Bach, is Mecca or Jerusalem for music lovers, then Thomaskirche is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Bach's final resting place actually is at the front of the church, which you see in the lower left picture. And this is where he worked from 1723 until his death in 1750. These images with beautifully restored sanctuary look quite different than they did when Jenny and I were there back in 1995. It was not long after reunification, and things in Eastern Germany still looked pretty grim, including this church, but it looks pretty spiffy now.
It sure does.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. In the upper right corner picture, halfway down the aisle there on the left-hand side, you can see a pulpit from which Luther preached in 1539, effectively bringing the Reformation to Eastern Germany at that time. One of the enduring experiences, I think, which I will always remember from our visit there 23 years ago, and I still find it moving. It's that of a young woman sitting at the front of the church, in front of Bach's grave, silently, simply being there, holding a rose in her folded hands, and just sitting. After about 10 minutes, she quietly got up, laid the flower down, and left. Very, very moving for me. The other church we'll visit is Nikolaikirche, which is where Bach actually began his Leipzig sojourn. Many of his works were performed here, and some of them even premiered here, as well as in Thomaskirche. They're actually only about 2 blocks apart, so we'll be able to visit each of them quite easily. This church has also got some significance in our time. It was October of 1989, when Nikolaikirche was the epicenter of a huge peaceful protest against the East German communist regime. Exactly 1 month after that event, on November 9th, the Berlin Wall came down. And you can see there's a plaque just outside the church, which you see there. And I got to say, the inside of the church looks pretty spectacular. I don't think it looked like that in 1995. So they've done an awful lot of work in Leipzig since over the last 25 years. Yeah. The Gewandhaus Orchestra has a long and distinguished history. The hall itself is a short walk from our hotel, and actually it's the only place where we've been able to secure book tickets so far, because it's the only orchestra that got its information out sooner than the rest. So we're going to a concert there on the Friday evening. We'll get to Leipzig sometime around noon. And the concert that night will consist of a Haydn symphony, lots of fun. It's almost the trio of the third movement sounds like bagpipes, and I like bagpipes, so I like this piece. And then there's a piece by Leonard Bernstein, very cool. Reminds me a little bit of the West Side Story. Prokofiev Overture on Hebrew themes. And finishing with the Shostakovich Symphony No. 1. Actually, a former student of mine played in that orchestra for a number of years. Leipzig has three native musical families. Bach, of course, but also Schumann and Mendelssohn. It's Mendelssohn who has a strong connection to Bach. Actually, without him, the music of Bach would probably never have seen the light of day. He is credited with discovering and re-premiering the St. Matthew Passion in 1829, which is just under 100 years from when it was heard for the first time. But get this, Mendelssohn's grandmother gave him the score of the Passion for his 15th birthday. He recognized, at the ripe old age of 15, its monumentalness and immediately got to work planning how he was going to present it to the world at age 15. Now, this is amazing. 4 years later, when Mendelssohn was still a 19-year-old kid, he actually pulled it off. So the Bach-Mendelssohn connection is very strong. Mendelssohn House is a couple of blocks, again, from our hotel. It houses some furniture and some of Mendelssohn's watercolors. He was a painter. Some of his music, letters, books, etc., etc. And it's just a wonderful place to be. The Bach Museum, which is right across from St. Thomas Church, houses an art gallery, an extensive instrument collection, and a Bach archive. That little thing you see in the corner there at the lower right, that's, I think, a vocal part that he himself copied out for that performance of the St. Matthew Passion when he was still a teenager. Amazing. Okay, Rod, over to you.
Okay, and then we move from Leipzig to Berlin. We might regret needing to leave Leipzig the way it sounds, but Berlin is Berlin, my friends. And there are hardly any words to capture it adequately. So we'll focus on the taste and the smell, the street food. We'll enjoy a barbecue with some of my friends in their backyard, and explore the high points and the side streets from our hotel on Alexanderplatz. Julia and I happened to be in Berlin in 2005, I think it was, with two of my students. We went there for an architecture tour, and the city had a citywide light exhibition that weekend. And there are three impressions from that, simply taken from this or that tour bus and walking down the streets. It was really very nice. We also took a river cruise along the Spree, which we will also be doing as a group. But then there's also music in Berlin, everything from the latest pop and subculture beats to arguably one of the best orchestras in the world.
Hey, that's my line.
That's you. You take
here's the Berlin Philharmonie.
You get the food, you get the entertainment, okay?
It's a magnificent building, as you can see on those images there. And it's almost 40 years old. It was completed way back in 1982, and it still looks contemporary. The orchestra is phenomenal. These guys play, men and women now. They play with commitment, care, brilliance, love. What else can I say? They sound terrific. I've put a YouTube link to a bundle that I got from YouTube, where there are about 30 clips, 2, 3, 4 minutes each, of the Berlin Phil. Everything from, what was the thing here? What's the name of that? Tom and Jerry, to Star Wars, to Tchaikovsky, to you name it, Ravel, some Stravinsky, Rite of Spring. I would encourage you, if you got half an hour sometime, just poke on the link that is part of after this presentation. It's phenomenal. We're waiting for the season to be announced. They usually do that around end of March to mid-April, something like that. We're also planning to attend a concert at a new hall that is quite close by, actually. It's called the Barenboim Said Academy. It's a fabulous building, amazing new chamber music hall. And again, we're waiting for the new programming to come out, and very much looking forward to going there. And here is...
Yeah, and of course, Berlin is also the wall and the history of World War II and the aftermath. Perhaps you've heard of the Holocaust Museum monument. It's really very powerful. I'm not totally sure what the designer had in mind, but it starts all very subtly, and all of a sudden you're surrounded, and you lose your orientation as you end up well below the surface. So we'll be enjoying, we'll be experiencing that. And I'm also planning some other sightseeing events for Berlin, and we'll lead the group through a couple of those experiences, like the monument, the government quarter, the new chancellery, along the route of the wall where it was, at least as it cuts past Brandenburg Gate. We'll do the street food scene and so on. I don't expect we'll go out of our way to find Checkpoint Charlie. I've heard it's become something of a tourist trap, so we have other things we can focus on for that time.
And our next stop is going to be Lübeck. Situated near the Baltic Sea, Lübeck is a medieval World Heritage Site. It's a city of Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, and neoclassical buildings, narrow lanes, and streets which haven't changed much in the last 600 years. Lübeck is famous for its 7 spires, which you can almost see there in one of the pictures, including those iconic twin towers which serve as the entrance to the city. Along with its quaint oldness, Lübeck has apparently a vibrant nightlife, with local pubs, bars, restaurants, and clubs coming to life when the lights come on. I think we'll all shed somewhere around 15 years at least. And
by the time we get there, you mean, from all of the walking we're doing? And
that's right, that too. And from the pubs and clubs and everything to the churches. There are 5 churches in Lübeck, actually, but the most famous one of them, I think, is St. Mary's, or Marienkirche. When I was a kid reading biographies of Bach, I had read about this famous walking tour that he did, walking 250 miles to hear this very famous organist of the day, Dietrich Buxtehude. Well, when we were in Lübeck some years ago, we went into this church, and I saw this plaque that said, 200 and whenever it was, in 1705, this is where Bach came to hear Buxtehude play. I couldn't believe it. So there it was. This is the place. And Bach actually spent 3 months here and got to know Buxtehude quite well. 2 years later, Buxtehude died. And Bach was only 20 when he did this. Okay. One last thing about Lübeck, Marzipan. Did I say that right?
It sounds pretty good to me, yeah.
Okay, well.
My favorite. It's not my favorite food. Julia loves it, but
well, it's
acquired taste, perhaps.
I think, it's only almonds and sugar. That's all.
That's right.
Apparently, there was a famine back in 1407, and legend has it that the government of the day called on all the bakers to make bread out of the stuff. There's a famous shop, Niederegge. Did I say that right?
That's pretty good, yeah.
Okay, would you fix it up, please? How do you really say it?
Wow, I give you my American version of it, Niederegge.
Okay, that's better. It's been on this site for centuries, and the ads from them guarantee that marzipan consists of 2/3 almond paste and, quote, ensuring its superior quality. The other 1/3 is sugar, ensuring its superior low-cal, low-fat diet designation.
Well, and then we move on to Hamburg, and I can hardly wait to revisit Hamburg's harbor area and the brand new Philharmonic Hall. It was under construction when we were there in 2013. That's the picture in the bottom left. We also have a couple of interesting extras in the works for Hamburg. A couple of clients slash friends of mine are going to host us on the top floor of their high-rise condominium when we arrive. Reinhard says the view of the city and the Philharmonie is fabulous, and so I'm looking forward to that. I'm also in discussion with a woman whose daughter is in an artistic dance troupe for special needs adults. There's a good chance we'll be able to take in the rehearsal that the group has on the Friday evening. So we're working on those kinds of things, and I hope they can happen. The video clip that I've seen of a performance of the dance troupe is really very interesting. As you can see at the bottom left, the Philharmonie was still surrounded by cranes in 2013, but it's finally completed now. After multiple years of construction delays and cost overruns, it came in at around 800 million euros. That's well over a billion Canadian and almost $1 billion US dollars. And you can dispute the cost for sure, and the extravagance. It will become, in my opinion, as an iconic complex that will mark Hamburg much as the Sydney Opera House has marked Sydney itself. The Hamburg Harbor City combines an amazing mix of old traditional architecture like the top row of photos there, along with brand new iconic buildings coexisting together within walking distance of each other. I'm looking forward to that very much. Yeah, and then in Hamburg, there's also the Reeperbahn, Europe's largest red light district. You might want to go there on a Saturday afternoon, as Julia and I did. You might want to go there to visit Beatlesplatz. Yes, the Beatles are part of Hamburg's proud music history as well. And there's even a monument with silhouettes of the four Beatles at Beatlesplatz. At the beginning of the 60s, the Beatles played legendary 8-hour gigs in the clubs at the heart of St. Pauli district, which is where the Reeperbahn is. They played over a period of several months in clubs along that strip. And yes, Hamburg takes credit as well for getting the Beatles started.
Well, here are some more pictures of that utterly amazing concert hall. It's simply out of this world. I mean, those pictures are truly amazing. I'm not going to say anything more about it here, but I would encourage you to find, there are quite a few videos on YouTube. There's one of them that I've linked to our presentation here. Rod, you were saying they have an amazing presence on Facebook.
They have a very enjoyable, informative Facebook presence, in English as well. Yeah.
Incidentally, it's interesting, the acoustician who designed the concert hall part of this is the same guy who did that Barenboim Said Hall back in Berlin. Again, you can find some information on that as well. A hall like this, the sound is amazing. I think I'd be happy to hear a concert of kazoo music if it would let me get into the...
Did you say a concert of zucchinis?
Kazoos.
Kazoos. I thought it was zucchinis. Okay.
Kazoos. Anyway, I really hope they have got tours. The thing is built on top of an old warehouse. I mean, the floor of the concert hall is already 10 floors off the ground. So it gets up there, and all of the light fixtures in the hall there, every one of them is hand blown. It's amazing. Anyway, back to you.
Okay. Yeah. One final word. This is not the first time Rennie and I have traveled together. All four of us spent several wonderful days in New York City in 2012. Rennie and Jenny knew their way around that time, and Julia and I benefited. This time the shoe's on the other foot, Rennie, and I'll try to take you and the tour around places I know and love as well. So we hope you'll join us on the tour. or perhaps you know someone else who does, who would love the experience. Let them know. Okay, let's see if Sandra has some feedback from you. Questions or questions about the tour.
Sure.
Something about what's most important for Canadians, Americans, and Germans as well. What have you got for us, Sandra?
Okay. Well, let me just thank you so much for your presentation. That was very informative. Lots of great photos and stories about what people can see. I just want to remind you, if you want to comment on what's most important to Americans, Canadians, or Germans, you can type it in the chat section at the bottom of your screen. You can also type questions about the tour in that section. Now, we are past 7:30, so if you need to go, that's okay. But for those who want to stay on to ask some questions and to just have a little bit more discussion, you are welcome to stay. So I have a thought about what's most important to Canadians. I think Canadians really value being nice and being liked.
Okay.
We were talking about that.
Being nice and being liked. Okay. Bill said something similar, but a bit different, yeah.
Okay.
But he's from Vancouver, and maybe that's where you're not from, though.
No.
Are we the only country where people, you bump into someone and even if it's their fault, you say, I'm sorry?
That's Toronto in my experience, yeah. You walk down the street and you bump into someone and they say sorry. Yeah. That's not German at all.
No.
So I haven't seen any comments from any attendees yet about what they think is most important to Americans, Canadians, and Germans. Rod, maybe you can share with us what your friends told us.
In the interest of time. Rolf said the most important thing for Germans was being better than you are. And then he went on to say the second most important thing for Germans is being liked.
Okay.
And he linked that also then to the history, and those two things ring true for me. They work hard to be better than you are, and they like to be liked. Yeah. Now, Rolf, his French wife, Rosa, Rolf's French wife said the most important things for the French is enjoying life.
Nice.
I get that.
Okay. And Bill from Vancouver said the most important thing for Canadians, in his view, was avoiding conflict.
Avoiding conflict, yes. Being nice, yeah.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah.
And Americans, Rod, we're waiting with bated breath.
I'm convinced the most important thing for Americans is winning.
America, I can believe that.
Winning.
Which is different than being better than you, right?
I think it's different than being better than you are. Yeah, it's winning. Yeah, and the second most important thing for Americans is to look like you're winning.
Okay, now we do have some audience questions about the tour.
Okay.
So with the first question is from Norman, and he asked, with the number of churches being visited, what is the likelihood of hearing any of the organs either in rehearsal or performances?
We're working on that. There is an organ recital that we're going to hear at Nikolaikirche. I have put out a number of written letters to a number of the organists in some of these churches. Haven't heard back. I would love to hear somebody in Lübeck. And if not there are three other churches to choose from. We will hear something. And Berlin and Hamburg all have amazing organs. So yes, I love organ music too. So I'm with you there, Norman.
Great. And Dolores is asking, would there be...
I hope we can feed that need for organ, Norm.
Okay. Okay, so and Dolores is asking, would there be time to go to Museum Island in Berlin?
Oh, we haven't planned the itinerary entirely, but we can certainly put that on the map. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Museum Island, we'll make a note of that.
I think, I mean, there's going to be free time. I mean, not everybody wants to go to churches, and not everybody wants to go to a Mendelssohn museum. Maybe you want to wander down the streets and do something else. Certainly.
In a place like Berlin, help me out, Sandra, but I think we're going to, Emily knows that, we're going to arrange for a 2 or 3 day pass where you'll be able to use all of the public transportation coming and going that's available. So it'll be easy to, once you get oriented, and by the time we've been to Berlin, you've figured out the system, you can go out on excursions yourself or take 3 or 4 people with you if you don't want to do the museum, Mendelssohn and whatever, for example. That's easily done, yeah.
Okay. Great. Does anybody else have any questions before we sign off? Again, you can type it in the chat section and we can have a look at that. Any other questions? Do you have anything else you want to add, Rod or Rennie?
Well, if you have, you know, if questions come to you after you sign off, I guess they can send questions to you, Sandra, and you'll just pass them off to us. Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
well,
I've enjoyed working, putting the presentation together with you, Rennie, and
I gotta say, I'm pretty excited about this.
It's going to be a great event. Yeah, let's make it happen.
Rod is an amazing purveyor of historical facts and factoids. Very
focus on
first time in Germany when we were, well, I think I told this story, with toothpicks in our eyelids trying to stay awake. He took us on a 3-hour tour of Munich, walking. But it was really.
I will add about the walking. We'll do a lot of walking, but it's a slow pace. It's not fast. And one thing I noticed different in California here, there really are very few places to sit down. But in Germany, there are lots of benches in the parks and places to relax. And as you mentioned, also this young woman in front of Thomaskirche at Bach's gravesite, just sitting down and thinking. And so it won't be a fast pace. We'll be able to take it at our own speed to some extent. Yeah.
Great. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a tremendous tour, and after this webinar here, we will send you to a page where you can look at some of the links that Rennie mentioned and have a look again at the tour description if you like. And I want to thank you again for joining us this evening, and all the best. Thanks again. Bye now.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Tschüss.